As you know, every year, or as you might recall, every year I'm supposed to give a report about the parish, including its financial state and some other things that we're working on. With my move coming up, I'm kind of, I wouldn't say being minimalistic about it, but I'm just going to keep it very brief if that's okay. So I will have a financial report coming out. Was hoping to have it printed for this weekend, didn't quite get around to it, but we'll post it electronically and we'll also have copies of it. So please do take a look at that. There's just a few things we need to be aware of in terms of rising expenses, rising costs, but overall we're doing just fine as a parish. And even more importantly, we're being ministerially successful, both in our projects and our evangelical efforts. Sound good? Okay, I think that's enough of a report for this year. But as I reflect on this gospel and also the past week, I was away for a canon law conference that I attend every year. I was here for the Sunday Masses, except for 10, to be with Father Emmanuel, which of course I always enjoy. But I went to this conference, and every year it's amazing how many scenarios, how many situations within the life of the church come up that really need special attention. And almost none of them are things that were proactively or creatively thought of. All of them, pretty much all of them, were concrete situations or even problems that arose, and we have to think, okay, how are we going to solve something like this when it inevitably happens again? I know that sounds very non-specific, but there are so many things that we have to worry about, even things related to penal law or property law or even sacramental law. The focus this year was on diocesan law, so many things that I don't need to bore the details of. But nonetheless, it can be a little discouraging at times when we think, wow, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a society as substantial and complicated and involved as ours. There are many important things that we do as the church that require us to be very, very vigilant and diligent in how we do them and making sure that we do them with everybody's rights respected, all the priorities intact. It can get a little discouraging because, it just is sometimes. Some of those problematic topics can be very, very discouraging. At the same time, I'm not making this up, the conference itself was not in SeaWorld, it was in Orlando, Florida. It was at a convention center that was just off the property from SeaWorld. So you can imagine the kinds of jokes. Canon lawyers tend to have a little bit of a darker sense of humor, imagine that. And that's just how it goes. Nothing really wrong or immoral, but just, very interesting, very legal sense of humor. Again, you wouldn't be interested in a lot of those things. But just suffice it to say, there was some lighthearted, or at least semi-lighthearted humor to accompany many of those very, very difficult topics that we had to tackle as a church. And that really kind of gave perspective for me as I prayed about this gospel. Pray always without becoming weary, which elsewhere is sometimes translated as, or other instances in the gospel are translated as pray without ceasing. In other words, always be in a mentality of prayer, even when you are not actively praying or say actively taking part in a devotion or a sacrament. But this one is very clear in being pray always without becoming weary. What does it mean to become weary in prayer? Even if we can't really describe it or enunciate it with a pure definition, we know what the Lord is talking about. It is easy to become weary in prayer because things don't go the way that we expect, or we don't receive the answer that we want, or as much as we might not like to admit it, we're not always very good at praying. Sometimes we suffice it to say, well, I've demanded what I expect, as I said a few weeks ago. Lamenting to God or complaining to Him about the way things are does not count as actually praying to Him, as actually asking Him for what we need. It might seem that way based on how often we do it and how often we lament just the way things are in our world, or the thing that we are frustrated most with in our lives has not been resolved yet, or especially when it relates to people in our lives. It does not count to merely say, God, it should be different. It should be this way. I want it, I want this particular grace. I want you to do it for me. I want the answer to this question, And some of those may be very legitimate things that well up within our hearts, but there is a right and a wrong way to bring this to the Lord. The example that Jesus gives is of a judge in a certain town who, as it says, did not fear God or respect any human being, a very bleak image that we get there. So it has a callback to a gospel that we focused on a few weeks ago, that of the dishonest steward, or I called him the scoundrel, right? That's the steward who was fired, and rather than just packing up his belongings and leaving his master, he goes to all his master's creditors, debtors, whichever one it would be in this case, and writes them a promissory note. In other words, forgiving their debt in a very, very major way. Not because that's the right thing to do, but because he sees that they might be favorable to him once he's basically abandoned by his master, sent out, fired, sent away. And the point of that is not to uphold him as a right and just man, but rather to say even a scoundrel like him, somebody who is very dishonest with earthly wealth, at least understands the importance of right relationships, at least understands the importance of being connected to other people. And if that is the case, how much more will a virtuous person, one who sees the good in these relationships, be able to do good for him or herself, but also for many other people that are involved? And if that's the case, how much more will God uphold right relationships and be faithful to the commitments that he's made? A similar principle is at play here. This dishonest judge who does not fear God or respect any human being, apparently he's a competent judge. He at least is academically and intellectually able to understand the precepts of the law to carry out a just decision, whatever that may be in this case. We don't really know what the actual issue is, but this poor widow finally persistently comes to him and says, "Render a just decision for me against my adversary. Solve my case." And in civil law, canon law, any legal system in the world will be very, very familiar with that. When's my case going to be done? When are you going to get this done for me? And, there's a lot of things that go into any legal system like that. So it's in some way it's understandable that it takes time. But as the regula juris say, justice delayed is justice denied. So she's reasonably frustrated with this. And this judge renders a decision for her because of her persistence. Not even because he cares about her, not even because he, at least doesn't say that he respects justice that much that he wants to render this decision. Rather, it's just her persistence. And again, the point of that is not to say, well, this judge is doing everything right. That's what the law is, right? I would argue the law is much more than that. It's about justice. It's about the good of the human person and the right standing of relationship within the church. But even somebody who only sees it from that, just from his perspective, without any respect for human being, without respect for God, is able to understand or is able to be brought to that point of doing the right thing. And if that is the case, how much more will God, who loves us with a love beyond all telling, who is singularly devoted to each and every single one of us in a singular way, as a son or daughter of his, how much more will he be able to render what is truly just in our lives if we are willing to be persistent and to ask him? Which really brings about a central, theme or a important aspect of the Christian life, the necessity of perseverance in prayer. And all of us, again, know what it's like to be weary in prayer for whatever reason that is. And, we can understand, at least at a base level, when certain, minor issues or challenges come up, it might be because the Lord is purely putting that difficulty in our lives so that we are more persistent or become more patient, or that suffering that may purify the soul. But I think it's the larger things in life, the larger crosses, where we think, okay, well, is the Lord just basically, based on what I'm hearing here, is the Lord basically saying, well, the reason why you suffer so much is because you need to learn to ask more, or plead more, or beg more, whatever verb you want to ascribe to it? And the answer to that is no. I think that's a very simplistic reading of the entire matter. It is never purely because of really one thing, unless you reduce it down to love of God, love of neighbor. But in terms of that persistence, in no way are we saying that the Lord gives us these afflictions solely because he wants us to be more patient, or solely because he wants us to be more persistent in prayer. But rather it is to say that no matter the cross, no matter the issue that we're praying about, no matter the discord between God's will and ours that we're trying to address, perseverance in prayer is always, always, always an integral part of the solution. And as much as we like to say, whether in law or in anywhere else, why can't we just X, Y, Z? Why can't it just be this way? Why can't we just do this? Why can't God just do it for me? Why can't this person just be different? Or whatever you want to say there. Persistently asking God for the grace to do what I can do is always a part of the real solution. As the saying goes with many things in life, consistency beats intensity every single time. 1 3-hour workout may be, that might be dangerous, I guess, but will never, ever compare to whatever you want to say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day for 3 years of the right kind of exercise, for example. One healthy meal, as healthy as it could possibly be, will not compare to eating a balanced diet and treating one's body and soul with the health it deserves for years at a time. And in a similar way, we might think of our most important spiritual experiences in this life, a time where we devoted a lot of attention to the poor, or were impacted by a retreat that was one weekend or however long it was. As much as that may be foundational or maybe a perspective that was given to us as a gift from God, that is not the daily basis for our life of devotion, our life of spirituality. Again, consistency beating intensity every single time. Unless we're a Carthusian monk or a Discalced Carmelite, those are very deliberate states of life that do focus on those heavier penances. The biggest opportunity that we have in our lives is to take those immediate moments of the chance to be more charitable, the chance to be more patient, the chance to give God a moment of, even if it's just as simple as an acknowledgement of God's presence, which can be very effective when we're, struggling through a situation that's persistent or, we don't have the answer to. Just to at least acknowledge God as often as possible, that he is present, that he is doing good. It can kind of, has many benefits, but perhaps chief among them, it can kind of erode away this entitlement that we can grow accustomed to, or this, whatever other, negative sentiment is there. Those little opportunities each and every single day. And the reason I mentioned that story about the Canon Law Conference, again, it was easy to be discouraged by some of the things that affect the daily life of the church, but those, whether it's those lighthearted or semi-lighthearted jokes, whether it was the, just the human connection of getting to see classmates, professors, and coordinate, collaborate, and kind of build that, build that collegiality within the law. Taking those opportunities within those struggles, within those challenges, complete game changer. And lest we think that that only applies to a certain few moments, if we look around enough, we will find ample opportunities to be more grateful, to be more charitable, to give a little time in service to the poor, to acknowledge God's presence in prayer in the morning, in the evening, at the middle of the day, all throughout the day, at work, at school, playing sports, doing homework. Any single moment of our life is an opportunity, if we look hard enough, to give God give our relationship with God the love, the attention that it deserves as our most important relationship in life.